This program is funded under the Conservation Collaboration Cooperative Agreement between the NRCS and South Dakota specialty producers. The goal of this agreement is to promote sustainable agriculture practices and environmental stewardship. Its contents are solely the responsibility of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official views of the USDA or NRCS. So with that, we can get started. Today, I just want to welcome again Wayne Knight as he discusses whole farm planning in the regenerative context. Wayne is the Executive Director of Holistic Management International, and we feel very lucky to get him to talk with us today. He has 27 years of ranching experience, first calling himself a cattle rancher, then a grass farmer, and then a soil microbe farmer. Wayne has years of experience as a holistic management educator, both in his home country of South Africa and here in the United States.
So as you heard, I've been a rancher mostly with cattle in South Africa, about 11,000 acres. This is where I'm from. Thorny country, pretty brushy country, lots of predation. So the genetic side of things was really important to us, adapting the genetics from what I took over from my dad. Lots of mistakes. I think talking about trial and error, we'll get into a little bit of how the decision testing helps with clarifying what you're doing, trialing, testing things, seeing what works in this complex environment that we operate in as farmers and ranchers. Really, really important. Currently, I'm living in North Texas, between Gainesville and Dakota. This is a picture from my porch when the cattle came past, the cattle and sheep came by in the summer. So, who knows the story? Anyone recognize who the characters are here? This is, if you don't know it, Alice in Wonderland. It's the part of the story where Alice encounters the Cheshire Cat. And Alice is asked, prancing along, and here's the cat in the tree. And Alice is asking, which road do I take? And the cat wants to know, well, where do you want to go? And Alice's response is, well, I don't know. To which the cat replies, well, it doesn't really matter. And this is a question about, well, which choice should I be taking? How clear are you about what you want, particularly when you're looking at a complex domain? I opened up by saying this is a complex thing that we're operating in. We got lots of variables. And choosing the right way can save us time, save us effort, save us frustration. How do we give that cat a better answer? So it's a lot that we do. If you're a farmer or a rancher, you're part scientist, you're part meteorologist, you're a bit of a mechanic, machine operator, financial planning, agronomist, all of these things and a whole lot more. And when you start making changes to your operation, which is moving in a regenerative direction or doing better in the regenerative space, how do you decide what's most important, what limited resources? Where do you spend that time? How do you make those decisions? So we know that farmers have lots of choices to make, and we're operating in with uncertainty. And where are you going? How clear are you about where it is that you're heading? From a financial point of view, from a quality of life point of view, from an ecological point of view. I talk about the founder of the Dixon Water Foundation where we live, the ranch where we live. The founder was very clear. He wanted tall grass prairie. That's his goal. That's what he's wanting to manage towards. Pretty clear that he wants it to be a profitable operation. So if you could write, or speak up and tell us, do you have a collective or a written goal? Is this something that that you've thought about, that you've written, articulated, and it's clear, is how clear is it to you? This study from 1979 was looking at MBA program graduates. They were interviewed, pretty interesting results. 84% had no specific goals. 13% had goals, but they were not on paper. And only 3% had clear written goals and how they were going to accomplish those. That's a pretty small percentage, but let's look at the results. The 13% of the class who had goals were earning, on average, 84% more than the ones who had no goals. And even more staggering, the 3% who had that clear written goal were earning 10 times as much as the other 97% put together. That's pretty incredible if you think about the power of having a goal, being clear about what it is and how to achieve it. I'm not saying that an MBA is the be all and end all. This is about having a goal, having it clearly written out. You get the results of what you set your mind to. That's the point of the argument or the study. So focus on things you want rather than things you don't want. There's another very interesting study, also at Harvard. Scientists were tracking these sophomores in 1938. So it's an old study. And what's fascinating is it wasn't middle-aged cholesterol levels or smoking or diet that predicted how people would grow old. I found this fascinating. The people who were most satisfied in their relationships at 50 were the healthiest at 80. So having good relationships with the people that you love, that the people that are important to you, should be a really important part of the goal if getting old gracefully is something you aspire to. So holistic management is aiming to guide families and businesses to be proactive, to have balanced goals, and to act on their collective choices. So it's not just my goal versus your goal. It's how do we work this out together? So I'm going to park that idea and as we move on. So changing to uncertainty, have you ever thought that bad news is more settling than uncertainty? I come from a pretty uncertain place. South Africa's been through pretty turbulent times in the recent past. And to me, the uncertainty of South Africa, not knowing what government was doing, not knowing what was coming, is far more debilitating, far more unsettling than having a very clear idea of the bad trend. Obviously, good trends is great, but bad news you deal with, you plan for, you get on with. And the point here is uncertainty is distressing. Um, you you can get over it. And with the high levels of uncertainty, your brain creates stress, or you live with stress because of the way that your brain responds to that. So it's just a fact that all business people live with uncertainty. But in ranching, we've got weather, we've got prices, the things that are affecting you. Recognizing that this uncertainty has a negative effect on your life plays into why holistic management is important. So, all of these factors that are impacting how we react and often how we don't react. Drought, I've lived through a number. Planning really, really helps in a drought situation. Being clear on what you're doing does reduce the stress, it enables you to function. If you're not planning, if you're not clear about how you're going to handle that situation, the bad news is you're able to deal with it with the planning process. The same for pricing, the same for planning for variable pricing. How do we recognize the uncertainties, plan effectively, and react appropriately when the time comes, and not be in a reactive or paralyzed mode because of the fear and the anxiety that comes with not knowing. So Simon Sinek talks about the brain cannot comprehend the negative. So I'm going to play this little video. I hope it comes through okay, and it might take me some fiddling to do it.
The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. It is incapable. Yes, it's true. I'll give you an example. Okay? No, I'll give you an example. You don't have to believe me. I'll prove it. Okay? The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. You ready? Don't think of an elephant. You can't tell the human brain not to do something, right? And so what happens is we very often reinforce things when we put things in the negative, right? I can't get apart. I can't get apart. I can't get apart, right? Or I can't do this versus I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this, right? And it's such a huge thing to convert things into the affirmative. You're supposed to do it with children as well. We're supposed to say, instead of saying to children, don't eat on the couch, we're supposed to say, eat at the table. Right? We tell people what we want them to, not what we don't want to do. Pilots know this, right? It is well known in the pilot community that when you tell a pilot, don't hit the obstacle, they'll hit the obstacle. Because what they're doing is focusing on the obstacle. Skiers know this. If you ever seen skiers go through trees, do you know how they do that? It's very easy. It's actually surprisingly easy. If you go through trees on skis and you go, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, guess what you're watching? You're only looking at trees. All you're doing is seeing trees. You don't understand how anyone can ski with all these trees, right? As opposed to follow the snow, follow the path, follow the path. The only thing you see is the path. Skiers know this. If you say don't hit a tree, you'll hit a tree. You won't be able to find a path because all you see is millions of trees. If you say only follow the path, you actually don't see any trees. There's actually very sparse trees. There's plenty of path. There's plenty of snow. It's the same thing for you. If you focus on the obstacles, all you will see is obstacles. If you focus on the path through the trees, all you will see is path through the trees. It's your choice how you choose to perceive your own career. It's literally perspective.
This idea of focusing on the positive is hugely valuable. It's hugely important. And when we're writing a goal, it's all about the positive. It's about focusing on the things that we want. And that's powerful and empowering, and yeah, that reinforcement really, really valuable. So what have we just established? These few concepts, just going to rehash them here quickly. Having a goal leads to success. Those are the Harvard studies. Uncertainty is stressful. Focus on what you want and avoid the negative. And we do a lot of things. So when we're thinking about whole management, we're trying to spread the management concept, the goal, as wide as possible. We're not focusing on one thing. So how do we do this? How do we get this all together? And it makes me think of an orchestra conducting all of these moving parts. You've got the timing's got to be right. the tone has got to be right, the pitch has got to be right when you're looking at conducting the music. And in a ranching and a farming operation, there's a lot about the timing. It's a lot about the planning. It's a lot about getting the money at the right time, having enough reserves in place, watching what's happening with if there are animals involved, how's their condition, how they're breeding, are they in the right condition at particular times. They're all of these things it's like conducting an orchestra, getting the right things to happen and focusing on the right places at the right times to make the music appropriate and flow and have all the tone and nuance that's needed. And in order to do that, we we need to have a plan. We need to have the sheet music. We need to have it in a clear written format and a clear process systematically worked out. Um, this is really important when you're dealing with the kind of complexity and when you're learning and adjusting. The whole idea of being adaptive in management so that you are observing and reacting to nature as the season unfolds, as the growing conditions adjust and change according to how that season unfolds, how the animals are responding to this, how the plants are responding to this. These all need to be taken into account. And if you've got a recipe and a plan to make that happen, all the better for getting a good result. And to me, one of the key components in this whole management process is having a decision process that enables us to focus on the right things, focus on what's the most important thing at this time to spend the time, the money, the effort. Getting those ingredients, getting the timing, and following the prompts is critically valuable. It's so empowering, and it actually takes so much out of the stress, out of the unknown. So when you're doing all of this stuff, we've got all of these things to do. How do you prioritize? This matrix, you maybe have seen this matrix. I find it incredibly valuable in helping explain what I'm talking about in managing complexity. So you've got these four quadrants. You've got the chaotic quadrant, the simplest quadrant, the complicated quadrant, and the complex, a place where we are interacting. So what's the difference? Chaos, you just don't know what's coming. How do you react to chaos? You just act. You've got a fire, you've got a storm, a flood, a crisis situation. You don't actually have time to think. Your response is the best that you can do in the moment. Let's go. In the simple, you make a list. You've got a to-do list, a whole series of actions that need to be done to get to fulfill the tasks involved with the simple situation. And the complicated environment is it can be lots of details, lots of moving parts, but it's structured. And if you take it apart, you can put it back together. If you do something at one moment in a process, it's completely understandable and replicable. It happens the same no matter how complicated it is. And we generally deal in this environment with specialists, experts, doctors and lawyers, mostly engineers, would deal in the complicated domain, and we bring them on with specialist skills and specialist knowledge to calculate and help. But in the complex domain, everything changes all the time. There's no predictable outcome, and we just got to figure it out. And most of what we're doing is in that complex domain. An expert cannot help you because they don't know the complexity and they can't know the outcome. So in this domain, mostly we're going to be trying to figure it out. And to me, one of the most elegant parts of a holistic management is that it's an enabling framework. It's not telling you what you should do. It's enabling you to plan and adjust those plans if the decisions come out differently from what you expected. Any plan is going to have these uncertainties, and understanding that complex piece rather than the complicated piece, and understanding how we fit into the complex piece, really, really important. Any questions or comments on that?
We have one comment. Farming for us, beginning our third season, has been a stress test in problem management. It can be overwhelming to remain focused on where we want to go when all day we see the problem screaming, "Don't go here." Great video. Okay.
So I take that as a comment, and hopefully, as we go through this, you're going to be able to see here's a potential framework to utilize to help you deal with that. If the holistic goal component is clear, you use decision testing, and that's where we'll come out with the best decision that you can make with the information that you have is pretty much what we're after. So going from that recognition that we very squarely operate in the complex, that consulting and expert advice is not that wonderfully valuable. You need a process for management, and you need a process that enables you to be as adaptive as possible. So there's so many management tools out there. I mean, what are you using as management tools? How effective are they? Anyone want to comment on what are the management tools that you're using? Effective, ineffective? Any thoughts? Anyone want to share?
Well, from an organic perspective, Wayne, we use on our farm an organic system plan to manage our crops and livestock, and that's what we primarily use.
Okay, fantastic. And I mean, that I bet that's really, really helpful, right? So other things that I've got here, I mean, simple as a calendar, a budget, Google Maps, spreadsheets, livestock recording software. They're all of these things to help us systemize and make sense of lots of things to do, get the order right, and get the sequencing right. So I'm going to dive into the holistic management framework, and I think to me it's elegant. It's both theoretical and a practical planning tool. So there are multiple aspects to any business. And the beauty to me is that these different planning processes, the different observation points, the decision testing, the feedback loop concept, the basic principles around which nature functions, which come right at the beginning of this, all function in concert for a really good outcome. You could take the whole framework into its different pieces and use elements of it, if that's what you choose. And probably starting out, you wouldn't try and use all of them in one go. You'd want to dig into different aspects of it, unpack them, learn how to use them. Just like reading sheet music, you don't just start reading music. You need to learn how to read it. You need to learn how to play the instrument. That's what we're talking about. It's a process, and a lot of people have found this framework extremely, extremely valuable. And I think what's really nice, there's so many other frameworks out there. I think of lots of management frameworks for business, management frameworks for nonprofit organizations. This framework's specifically designed for agriculture. So starting out, holistic management has these main principles. The first one is that nature functions in wholes. That's speaking to that complexity piece, that when one thing in a ecosystem on your farm changes, everything else is changing at the same time. Nothing functions in a linear way. It's the spider web. Pull the thread on one side of a spider web and the entire spider web reacts. And getting that feeling for it's different from how we've been taught. We have a very linear approach to or expectation of how the world functions, how nature functions, and it's really, really complex. So that's the first concept. Management must be adaptive and towards a holistic goal. So having a recipe for your garden, your farm, your livestock production system, not very useful. If you have to adapt to the season, you have to adapt to what's currently happening, recognizing that adaptability and towards the holistic goal, that's that clearly defined portion that we were talking about in the beginning, that Harvard study saying the clearer you are about the outcome, whether it's ecological outcome, your quality of life outcome, your financial outcome, the clearer you can be about that outcome, the more likely you are to get it. But in this environment, in this complex environment, we're not specifying a quantity. We are having a general balancing process. We're looking at the future and we're looking at the current. So that adaptive and towards the holistic goal is trying to bring the balance of future and current and all of these elements at the same time. And the third principle here is understand your environment. You need to understand the local situation. How does your land respond with your situation, aspect, rainfall, all the things that make your place unique? I've mentioned the ecological component, the economic component, and the social component. Broadly speaking, that is what we're trying to get that orchestra to consider as we're playing the music. So digging into the holistic goal component, we generally say it has three parts. I've added the part of we must define the whole under management. What is it that we're managing? Who are the people with decision-making power? What is the purpose if you're looking at a business? Why does this business exist? If you've started in a farming environment, why is it that you've chosen that? Let's be clear on the outcomes. Let's be clear on the purpose of the business so that everyone understands it. In terms of quality of life, what is it that we want to live and feel, experience on a day-to-day basis? The behaviors and systems is what are the actions, the behaviors that we need to hold ourselves accountable in order to have quality of life, achieve the statement of purpose, and have the future resource base function in the way that it needs to. How must the land respond? How must it be well into the future to sustain us, our grandkids, the next generation, all the animals that we coexist with? Those are the different components that make up the goal. Here's a slide that is pretty busy, but to me, this makes so much sense when you start to unpack what is the statement of purpose, looking down on the left-hand side. You're defining the whole under management. You're defining why you're in the business that you're in. You're writing about how you want to feel in the quality of life. What is it that you want your day to be filled with? Is it loving? Is it financially secure? Is it a pleasing place to be? And then to feel loved, what are you going to need to do? What are the behaviors and systems that you're going to undertake to live each day? What are the planning processes that you need to have in place to feel that, to experience what you need to experience? And then on the future resource-based side, your future vision, what's your land going to look like well into the future? If you're going to have tall grass prairie, you're going to need to manage in a certain way. You're going to have a plan for grazing effectively. You're going to have a plan for having your animals, and you're going to need be hold yourself and your team or your family accountable to we're going to have to do this grazing plan so that we can get this future land health, the soil health that we aspire to. We need those things in place. And building this out, you're building out both the desires and the accountability pieces, the things that must be in place to enable that to happen. Any thoughts or questions there?
Wayne, one comment. We're at 3:38, just so you know.
Super. Thank you. So I'm going to probably overwhelm some of you if the framework is pretty new to you. If we're talking about whole farm management, then I think it's incumbent on me to say, here is the entire framework. I can't go into detail, as Olivia just pointed out. I've got about 15 minutes left. But I think just giving you an overview of the first, we've covered the principles. Nature functions in wholes. Management must be adaptive towards a holistic goal and understand your local environment. Covered. We've covered the holistic goal portion. What's the whole under management? Who the management team is? What are the resources, physical, social, and financial that we have? Getting a clear handle on what is it? What's the end of our management? Who has the veto power? Just enables you to think very clearly about what is it? What is the extent? Where does our management start and end? Very important to me not to be outside of that whole under management in our sphere of concern. We tend to spend a lot of time, well, I do, when I'm worried about the world and politics and things out of my control, being very focused on this is where I have influence. Very empowering. I've introduced you to the holistic goal, the quality of life and values, the behaviors and systems, and the future vision. How must this land be and how must our community be way into the future to sustain this quality of life that we have now? This block coming in now is understanding the ecosystem processes that sustain us all. Water cycle, very, very degraded in most of the world, unfortunately. Mineral cycle extremely slowed. When you've got too much grazing, the mineral cycle is very shallow. If you plowed land, there's very little mineral cycling happening at all. Energy flow, how much sunlight is being captured on your piece of land relative to the rainfall that you receive, and how biologically diverse is your environment. I love Jonathan Lundgren's stories about we are, as farmers, growers of life, enablers of life, and measuring our success in terms of the biodiversity and the biomass, the energy flow, mineral cycle. That is the monitoring that we're going to be looking at the land from an ecological point of view to see how it's responding in each of those areas and measure our success or lack thereof according to the improvements we're making in ecosystem function. The management tools, very useful to be analyzing when we ride into the thick of management. If we use chemicals, not all chemicals are equally bad. If we have to use a chemical, what are the long-term implications of a chemical? Should we be using it? How do we get around it? How do we mitigate? If we're going to use fire, understanding the implications of a fire, the risks of a fire, the ecological benefits or lack thereof. Fire can be an extremely useful tool that often has very negative or unthought of consequences. We can go through the tools and evaluate them relative to the outcome and relative to our financial economic situation and ecological humps or plateaus that we might need to get over. As long as we're recognizing the long-term impacts of those tools and it's well considered and well thought through, we don't want to prejudice tools and blanket all tools as equally bad, because very often we can get by and mitigate really effectively depending on the real negative impact or the real positive impact, because with every tool there's a positive and a negative, and appreciating that relative to the ecosystem is valuable. Critical in all the management is the feedback loop. If we're going to be adaptive, if we're going to respond to nature, we have to be aware of what's going on all the time. In particular, with regard to lead indicator monitoring. This is a pet peeve of mine, I get quite concerned about monitoring for the sake of monitoring or monitoring from a scientific perspective. In other words, we get into habits or we hear about, oh, we need to be monitoring something in particular. But if it's not helping your management, if it's not a lead indicator, something that's going to enable you to respond to and improve your management in the short term, soil health is something really valuable to aim for. It's really nice to know how much carbon you've managed to increase. If you're managing to increase carbon, what's the success rate? But carbon in the soil is not a lead indicator. It's not helping you make your next management decision. They're going to be in a cattle or a sheep or a livestock operation, hundreds of decisions that are going to amplify and multiply to create the effect on the carbon. Let's be very clear what are management monitoring points and what are nice to know, nice to brag about monitoring points. And the monitoring goes way beyond just the biological. How are we monitoring our social interactions? How are we monitoring our financial performance? All of those things are built into what's coming next here, the adaptive management processes that we have: financial planning, land planning. We call it land planning. It's really infrastructure planning. What is the ideal land look like in the future? If you're reading books about what was there, and that's an aspiration to get it back into a natural state. The founder of the Dixon Water Foundation, he wanted this tallgrass prairie. In order to get the tallgrass prairie back, we're going to need water infrastructure on the property. We're going to need fencing or virtual fencing, ways to move animals around effectively. We're going to need handling facilities. So instead of using what's here already, what's the long-term vision? To get that tall grass prairie, certain things are going to be in place, and the implementation of the land planning is going to be incremental. At times, we're not going to do any land planning depending on the needs of the business. At times, it's going to be a high priority to put in fence, to put in water, having the plan and then implementing it at the appropriate time is really, really valuable. Begin with the end in mind. We have the marketing and business process. We have the cropping planning, the grazing planning or biological planning, getting the timing for the animal, for the plants right. When are the animals going to graze in a particular place? How long do they need to be away for the plants to recover effectively? At what point in the production cycle do animals need to be in a certain body condition score for the whole production cycle to function optimally? That's all involved in the grazing planning process. So all of these, to me, are really valuable because they are that recipe. They are that sheet music that helps us plan effectively, think through all the variables, and prioritize. And the last portion here is the testing questions. These are the filtration. this is the piece that enables us to prioritize what's really important. Where do we focus our attention at any given moment? What's the best way to do things? Where are we going to get the biggest bang for the next dollar spent or the next hour invested? So that's the framework. That was quite a mouthful. I want to go from the framework to the management process. So it's the same information that I'm now going to depict as we start with the holistic goal here on the left. You've seen what that is. We've been through that. We're going to use decision testing to filter our policies, our goals, whatever projects we're going to do, whatever programs. The decision testing enables us to choose which of those and how we structure those basic business components. From there, we're going to create SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound from the holistic goal. We're then going to use decision testing as we implement, as we go through if we're going to do the grazing planning, if we're going to do the financial planning, we need the goal, we need the policies, and we need that planning process, the recipe of how we're going to undertake the next season, how we're going to be observing, what are the lead indicator things that we're going to be looking for. They're all guided from this goal that enables us to begin with the end in mind. We're then going to be testing decisions again, and we're going to be looking at the monitoring to see how is what's happening different from what we planned, and then enable us to adjust. And so at a very high level, that is the management process. It's the stepwise, logical process. Unfortunately, I can't go into each of the planning processes. Extremely valuable to me in my operation. Lots of learning, but highly valuable. And then, I think I've covered the decision making here, depicted as a funnel. We're putting a whole lot of options in the top. We're asking questions related to profitability, comparing different enterprises. Is this the best source of money, or is this the best use of fuel? Are we actually achieving the holistic goal by doing this? To me, the most powerful piece here is the weak link analysis, which helps us decide where we're going to spend that next dollar, where we're going to spend that next hour of time. Digging into that, it's really a part of the theory of constraint, developed by Eliyahu Goldratt. Eli Goldratt is a brilliant man. Most of the weak link is used in engineering and production environments, where you're really looking at where's the constriction in a business process, and focusing your attention on the weakest link. And in the farming environment, it's pretty easy to identify, and it changes. A rainstorm can change where your weak link sits, and you go from being in a drought situation. A month later, you're no longer in a drought because you've had a couple of follow-up rainfall events, and suddenly the weak link shifts. And being aware of the shift and where you should be spending the money based on that shift, extremely important as you're deciding where to optimize return on money and return on time. I'm going to take a breath, let that sink in a little bit. So broadly speaking, we have 6 practices. Define what you manage, state what you want, build healthy ecosystem function to fulfill your life, consider all the tools in the toolbox, whether that's grazing, which is a tool, Time is a tool. Plants, living organisms, all of these things are tools that can influence how the ecosystem works, and we can use them cheaply or inexpensively in a different way, in a different season to get the best results. So we really do encourage considering all the tools available, because sometimes a prejudice will hold us back. And then test your decisions and monitor lead indicator monitoring points to make sure that you respond as quickly as possible when things are off track, which they inevitably will be. The topic today is whole farm planning in a regenerative context. So reinforcing this idea that to be regenerative, it needs to be regenerative for the people. It needs to be regenerative for the environment. And we've got to get beyond sustainability. Sustainability is keeping things the way they are. Here is a planning process. Here are a set of tools that, if applied, if you make them part of your habitual day-to-day management, it is really, really empowering. And yeah, it's helping build the whole. So many conversations that I get into, there's this impression that you can't have healthy environment and profitable food production. What we're talking about here shows that that is a fallacy. We really can do this in a mutually beneficial way. And here is a planning process and an understanding of the natural components, building this tension between the future and the current needs. It's really elegant. So the results are that we're building ecological processes, are improving financial viability, both through ensuring that we're profitable and building wealth, ecological wealth at the same time. So there's more than the economics of money going on here. There's this building of true wealth. In our situation in South Africa, we managed to get 3 times the carrying capacity over 20 years. To me, that is real wealth. That is, incredible change in water effectiveness, incredible change in the biological structure of the range that we were managing, changes in species, huge improvement in water infiltration, what do you call it? A reservoir on the property. Hardly, well, 4-inch rainfall would fill it when I was a kid. And in a very wet season with maybe 25, 30 inches of rain, sometimes that reservoir wouldn't fill up because all the water was running into the ground. And then the social well-being. Before I used holistic management, or our family used holistic management, my dad and I couldn't work together. Once we got the goal sorted out, once we'd articulated what we needed from the business, set up the business structures to enable what we really wanted, me young and ambitious at the time, being able to take risks, setting up the business structures so that my dad wasn't exposed to those risks, that was really empowering. So lots is possible when we use the framework, and yeah, it's enabling us to be good stewards, to be less uncertain, or to be much more certain and have less stress, helping us prioritize and focus on the positive. All parts of of the value of this whole management framework. So with that, I've got this question to ask. If you made use of this framework, how would you answer the Cheshire Cat? I know I've used most of the time, but I hope there's some time for some questions. This QR code will take you to our website.
Okay. So thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us on a future webinar.